All right, everybody, welcome to the Kubernetes SIG Archicture Office Hours meeting. Today is Thursday, June 28th, 2018. I am your host and moderator and co-chair, Jay Singer-Dumars. And I'm not sure if my co-chair Brian is on yet, but hopefully he is, and some other folks. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you are watching after the fact, the agenda and notes for this meeting is available at bit.ly/sig-architecture, which I'm going to right this moment myself, and we'll take a look at what's on the agenda today. So we'll get started here. So KEP tracking review. I'm going to paste a link to this in the chat. So basically, I just wanted to give a quick update on this. One of the things that I'm trying to do across the project in various places is to have these project boards for things that we need to keep an eye on, especially when it comes to stack ranking and understanding where things are at in processes, especially where you have long-lived processes like KEPs or steering committee backlog items, or soon we're going to have conformance test tracking, which I will convert to a backlog much like this. And the idea is simply that we can, at a glance, see what needs to be done. You'll notice that the third column in this project board actually needs API or architecture review. So as KEPs reach the point where they are implementing and need some sort of review, either from this group or the API review group, which is being formed, that you can put those issues into this column, and then basically we'll review this every SIG architecture meeting so that people understand what needs to be looked at. And hopefully this will be something that is easier to sustain than people just sort of ad hoc doing this. Additionally, we want to provide a method for people to easily track this stuff. So. Hey, Google, Tim Hawken and folks, you are not on mute, just FYI.
No, we're not. That's interesting. It doesn't show on there.
And so that's pretty much that for the project board. And it looks like there's nothing in review for this week, so we'll go ahead and move on. The API review process. There is a document that we've discussed. It is out there and being looked at by the API reviewers. As discussed in the last meeting, we basically have made the LGTM from the review team themselves blocking. So until those are all LGTM'd, we're going to keep this document open alive. And once it's LGTM'd by the API approvers listed, we will go ahead and put this in a markdown and put it open for a final week of comment from the community, and then merge it. And this will become the process. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, please go ahead and go to that document and check it out. There's been some really great feedback so far. Thank you for everybody who's taken the time to review it.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Jace?
Yes, girl, good.
Yeah. So overall, the process looks really good.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Yes.
Creating a backlog and a process for deciding which reviews need to be surfaced in these meetings is going to be super useful for API reviews, for KEPs, for conformance testing. So if we can get these multiple backlogs in place, I think that will help with managing the SIG architecture work streams massively.
Agreed. Cool. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to the next thing, which is an issue out there about broken KEP numbering, which is 2245. I don't know. I just put this in here because it seems like something that's causing some friction in the community, and I just didn't know if anybody had any thoughts on it about how best to approach this.
Well, what is the summary of the brokenness? Is it just that they're not in the same directories, so they're not easy to find?
Okay.
I didn't actually see the claim that it was broken, but my guess is that is part of it. That now that the KEPs are being moved into SIG specific subdirectories, it's not very easily discoverable. I have seen a number of KEPs get renumbered after the fact. I actually thought that was the original plan, that KEPs would initially just go in as 0000, and an editor would sweep through and apply numbers once they got merged. That has not been what is happening. We had a number of discussions about this in the original KEP design discussions. I don't know if there's a record of those discussions in the KEP PR or PRs, but it kind of became pointless to continue discussing it because people had such strongly differing point of view. So I think now that we have some experience, we're in a better position to actually make a decision. I don't know that there's a huge amount of value in actually assigning like low digit numbers to the KEPs. I mean, for my purposes, just having some historical sense of recency and overall sequential timing of the proposals is somewhat valuable. That could be done just by putting dates inside the documents if we had a tool for plucking out those dates and sorting them. I don't actually believe in practice people will be referring to KEPs by number other than perhaps me, since everybody is shocked when I remember issue numbers. So I don't actually think they're that valuable in referring to the proposals themselves, especially once we start getting into the dozens or hundreds, much less thousands of KEPs. So proposals were either use dates as numbers or use some kind of like PR number as numbers or issue number as numbers. I don't know if we need any numbers. If we did want numbers, the idea of, if we kept a backlog of KEPs, much like the proposal for the API reviews, I could imagine just using issue numbers. So you just file an issue and that would give you a number and then you could put that in your KEP. That would seem to work reasonably. It would also be kind of similar to the features process. That seems reasonable to me, auto allocation via GitHub issue.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, was the idea, I think originally that the idea was sort of like a primary key that could be used in terms of automation, or I don't know but it doesn't seem that important to the overall integrity of the process. So I think that it's causing way more friction than it needs to. So I think that we should target just documenting what that should be and moving forward. So I think maybe if somebody wants to step up and volunteer to make some sort of proposal there, that would be great.
Is this discussed on the SIG Archicture mailing list?
No, it's in the issue 2245 is mainly where it's at.
Someone should just send a message to the mailing list with a link to the issue and mention that we should aim to resolve this quickly. I don't know if a week is a reasonable goal since we don't have a meeting next week and it's 4th of July and such.
Yeah.
But maybe 2 weeks, we should just have a decision on that. I actually think we could, I like create a repo just to allocate the numbers and maintain the backlog, but not actually move the KEPs there. That would be my preference. I don't want to move the KEPs to a different place than the design proposals and the develop directory because we don't have a clean division of design documentation between those 3 locations.
I agree, and I think that this is the pattern of having a project board tied to issues in the project board is going to be something that actually works for us. It seems like very promising. So I would second that.
I would also say I've been trying to keep more attention on KEPs, and it's been really difficult because all the other traffic in the community has made it very difficult. So if there was a separate index that was...
honestly, even if it's a separate repo, if notifications are driven on a comment by comment basis, I'm going to have to filter them out anyway.
But at least I can label them so that when I scan my inbox, I can pick out which ones are which. Right now, I've just got a big orange label that is everything community, and I can't filter that. There's just too much stuff. I agree
with that, but I've given up completely on notifications. I'm just using polling.
Not all of us have given
up.
I'll send the issue to the mailing list, but just naked without any comment.
Yeah, a separate repo with issues being filed. You could just watch that repo and you would see.
Yes, and then at least I can put a big red label on it that says, hey, there's a new KEP proposal.
And you could unsubscribe to the issues that you don't care about.
Yeah. I like this. I think this pattern, I'm really starting to like it. The more time goes on, the more I like it. And then people can create commentary in those issues on the tracking. that are related to the project management around the KEP, as opposed to having it be in the KEP itself, which should be technical discussion. So it sort of separates those two concerns out, which I think is important.
Yep.
Okay. There are two things in here that I did not put in, which is vertical pod autoscaler, CRD, or built-in API, and office hour meeting discussion is useful. So I don't know who put those in, but if whoever put the vertical pod in, if they can talk to that.
So hello, I'm Martin Vilgus. I'm one of the leads of SIG Autoscaling. So to give you a little bit of context, in March this year, we launched alpha version of vertical pod autoscaler. It's a thing that adjusts the pod request based on the actual CPU and memory usage. Users are allowed to configure vertical pod autoscaler for a particular set of pods which they want to control, so they provide a selector plus some extra configuration options. For alpha, we decided that we will do a CRD-based configuration. Now, the more we think about it, the more we are leaning towards defining an official Kubernetes API under the autoscaling group.
So I just want to stop you right there, Martin. Please don't use the word official. I think CRD is an implementation mechanism, so the difference is kind of a dynamic custom resource or a built-in resource.
Okay.
So otherwise, continue.
Okay, so we are thinking about putting into this autoscaling group, so that is next to horizontal pod autoscaler, which does a little bit similar job. However, instead of scaling vertically, it scales things horizontally. So there was an attempt to do this API addition at the very last minute in Kubernetes 1.11, the attempt was rejected, and it was suggested that we go to SIG Archicture to check whether it's the right move to add this extra vertical pod autoscaler API to this built-in APIs.
So my question is, how much dependency does this have on the cloud provider implementation?
None.
Okay.
It, however, may have some dependencies on monitoring solutions that are used there. Currently, vertical pod autoscaler doesn't use any historical storage. It was designed in such a way that it can work without any persistent storage. However, in the future, it may be expanded by someone.
So, unfortunately, I'm actually going to suggest that we reschedule this to a future meeting. If you could put links to the proposals and the APIs into the agenda and potentially prepare like a 5-minute presentation, I think that would be super helpful. I don't think we can have a constructive conversation about this without adequate background at this meeting.
Okay. Would you like to do it during office hours, or should I schedule it on the regular SIG Archicture meeting?
Okay, so for that, I will. I added the topic about office hour versus meeting distinction. So I'll just sidetrack to that for a moment. I actually believe that distinction has not been useful. We haven't really paid attention to it. So I'm going to suggest we just eliminate that distinction, and we just try to schedule some amount of working time and some amount of presentations of issues, API reviews, etc., in every meeting. So I would say just let me look at the schedule. So unfortunately, so next week is a holiday in the US for a number of people, certainly all Googlers. The week after that, it could be discussed, although I can't actually attend. And the week after that, I can attend. So, you know, if another API approver wants to field it, it could be 2 weeks from now, or otherwise 3 weeks from now, or we could take it up on the mailing list first.
Okay, so the initial review was done by Tim. So, Tim, are you suggesting going with this 3-week delay, or should we do it with you only?
I've already reviewed it from an API review point of view. It's okay. The question is, I don't think we have a clear guidance on where we want the line to be for what we're taking in and what we're not, what the rationale for being in the same groups and not is. Like, I find the argument of being in the same group as HPA actually pretty strong. I know that argument was rejected for storage stuff. I agree with that because I think the storage argument was not as strong.
Well, so there's also just this issue of raising the bar for things that are built in to the API server and to the controller manager, and spending more time and getting more user feedback in terms of proving them out as we try to slow down the growth of the overall scope of the project. So where does the controller code currently live?
Currently, the controller is outside of the controller manager. And probably it will remain there, so it will be more like an ingress controller than horizontal pod autoscaler controller, which is built into controller manager.
Oh, okay. Well, if that's the case, I think that strongly suggests it doesn't make sense to be a built-in API.
So, question: does it make sense to potentially move horizontal pod autoscaler out into an autoscaling group?
Yes.
I was just about to ask that. This is Solly. Hold on, I'll turn on my video. The other SIG auto-scaling lead. I've actually been wondering for a little while now if it makes sense to, because we've been trying to iterate some on the horizontal pod autoscaler as well, and I've been wondering if it makes sense to just move auto-scaling out into a separate, aggregated API server or something, and have the controllers be separate as well.
So my gut is that the answer to that is yes. I don't know that it needs to be an aggregated API server. We're trying to make CRDs fully featured enough that they can work these kind of use cases. I don't expect.
I mean, at the moment, CRDs don't do enough of the conversion that we need to continue to support existing versions of HPA.
I understand.
Acknowledged.
I understand.
But CRD versioning is in flight right now. I think isn't it Alpha 111?
It's not going to help them auto-convert existing APIs to the new API. I think we could consider having a parallel API.
It also doesn't work for the kind of versioning that was done to get auto-scaling to where it is today, right? So HPA would not have survived with the conversions that are in place and planned for CRDs.
I understand that as well. I'm not saying that you can't use aggregated APIs. I do think that they won't get nearly as much usage until we solve the storage problem.
Put it another way, using an aggregated API solves the immediate problems at a really high cost. And we think that the problems over the long term need to be solved for CRD anyway. I fully acknowledge that pushing things out, like taking HPA and putting it out to a CRD architecturally is right, but may not be right now. But maybe starting new things there is right enough.
Yeah.
Is there a rush to? So, aside from, could you do vertical pod autoscaling in an autoscaling group that lived as a CRD or as an API server outside of the main repository, punt on removing HPA until CRD becomes mature enough, and provide feedback to the current developers of the CRD versioning to get it mature enough. And then after that's done, consider moving it back out into a separate group.
So you are suggesting to move HPA and HPA out of built-in API. So keep it as CRD the same way as vertical pod autoscaler. Wait until everything matures and then bring them both together, or decide.
I think that is the proposal that Ken's making.
The only thing that I see there that's tricky is that, in theory, at least from the API machinery perspective, things that are in the same group, like vertical pod and horizontal pod autoscaling, are supposed to live and die together and evolve together. But I don't think, and I can't say this with 100% certainty, I don't think there's anything from a technical perspective that was from implementing an autoscaling CRD either as an aggregated API server or just as a CRD and deploying that at the same time as horizontal pod auto-scaling as a core or in-tree type, and just evolving that until it effectively CRDs are mature enough for you to move HPA out, and still keeping them as both in the auto-scaling group.
And you can also just have the controller watch both APIs in terms of migrating to a newer version. You know, deleting an HPA and recreating it, I don't know if the implementation would handle that gracefully today, but I don't think there's any strong reason why
We
it
have
couldn't.
machinery-related issues that we need to address in this evolutionary trend. If we want this to be the direction of evolution, we have to address people who are going to take things that are built in and moving them out. How do we version them, and do we convert between them? Do we declare that they are actually equivalent resources and they're just different versions? Or do we say it's a new resource and you have to move it? I don't want to solve the issue here. I'm saying
I think actually that's fine in many cases.
Yes, I agree. I just think it's an open question. To Ken, actually, your point about how API groups are supposed to evolve and version together, I asked that exact question of API machinery this week, or last week. I was told no, that is in fact not the intention, and that API versions are sparse, and that if
Not versions, groups.
Groups, yes. So if I have a group with resources A, B, C, and they're all at version 1, and I want to add version 2, version 2 of B, there's not necessarily the case that version 2 of A and C exist. Surprise to me, but that is what API machinery is claiming.
So unless things have changed drastically, that may or may not actually work.
It currently works for the batch group today, right? Exists an example, cron jobs. There are other examples as well related to admission, and at least one other one related to the API server where you have different resources in different states. Some in alpha, some in beta, some in GA. And
go ahead, sir.
And so if you're evolving, for example, a cron job, but you're not evolving a regular job, then you don't put a regular job into a beta level. There's just no need to.
So the particular problem we ran into with the workloads API when we were promoting deployment, stateful set, daemon set, and so forth is we noticed that if you didn't register the new type in a version in the same group, the automatic resolution for codec negotiation failed. It started returning the wrong types. Now that
was a bug, and we fixed it.
Okay, it's fixed. Okay. Fair enough.
Did we come to a resolution on how we want to discuss this?
I think we actually ended up just discussing, we decided the details of the API were not critical to the discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so for now, the decision is to stay with CRD in vertical put autoscaler.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, that was great.
Cool.
Okay, I think that we are at the end of our agenda. We can choose to use this half hour independently, or we can do it as a group. My inclination is to table the meeting, so since we all probably know how best to use our time. Brian, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to chip my way through some of the backlog issues. So, now is the time to comment on any other API improvers or other interested people on the call. Please do take a look at the API review process. As I mentioned earlier, we are also going to put into place a backlog for TEPs. In fact, Jace already created one in the community repo, which if we create another repo to resolve the numbering issue, that backlog would have to be moved. And sadly, I don't know that there's an automated way of doing that as yet, but I haven't looked
There's
at
a way of moving it. There's a tool somewhere that lets you move issues. I mean, all it does is take an issue and recreate it.
But this is projects, which I don't know if they're adequately surfaced through the API yet. At least they weren't the last time I looked at the API's documentation. Maybe they are now. I don't know.
Well, the new one would actually be totally different with its own issues and the whole thing. So I'm just going to start from scratch in the new repo.
Okay.
So there's just no better way to do that, unfortunately.
And then we need one for conformance as well.
Yep. Do we have a SIG architecture repo?
No.
We should.
I mean, that would be one way to address all three, is we could just have one repo with multiple project boards.
That would make a ton of sense. Because there's no the automation from GitHub on the project boards is atrocious. So it's really a manual process regardless. And so,
yep.
Brian, let's you and I just work offline to get that repo created, and then I'll run with it. Does that work okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Reminder to everybody, we're canceling the next week's meeting, and so we'll adjourn the week after that. We are abolishing the notion of office hours, so every meeting is a regular meeting. Let's carve out some time to work, and if we don't have things to talk about, let's not use the time. So in that spirit.
Can I just one more echo for anybody here who considers themselves to be either an API reviewer or not considers themselves, anybody who is an API reviewer or would like to be, please go read that doc and make sure you read it as if you were a community member, so that it is crystal clear what they have to do and what they can expect from us. And when that's not true, please do feedback.
Yes. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks all.
Yep. Thanks.